now. And I'm going to, it's going live. All right, we're live, and I'll leave it off to Ryan.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys, and then we can just kick off. I'll just
Go over what, I'm not sure what you want to go over today. I think we're going to go over VNet, right? Some
Yes.
networking.
Hi, everyone. Yes. Thanks for joining again today, everybody. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to have a bit of fun. We're going to not just create a VNet. I mean, anybody can create a VNet, but I'm going to push it a little bit. We're going to create 2 VNets. We're going to throw a machine in each VNet, and then we're going to connect those 2 VNets together using VNet pairing. So again, it's not a long lab. It's a pretty short lab. When I mean pretty short, it won't take too much time. So I could have set things up and would have been as easy as 1, 2, 3. But I want you to know how to do this from the ground up. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create 2 resource groups. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got some stuff typed out in Notepad just to save time. So I'm going to go ahead and create a resource group by clicking the resource group in your Azure portal, and obviously clicking create. Then I'm going to go ahead and paste a name. I'm going to call my resource group VNet Auckland, review, and create. Then I'm going to go ahead and create another resource group. I'm going to call that VNet Sydney, because let's say this virtual network is in Sydney. We want to connect Sydney's network to Auckland's network, or New York to California. Whatever you want to do, this is the way to do it. So I'm going to click copy again. I'm going to create another VNet. And I'm going to paste that in there and click review and click create. It's going to go away and do its validation. And I'm just going to close this down. And as you can see now, we've got a Auckland resource group and we've got a Sydney resource group. So what we want to do is the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create 2 VMs. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put them in 2 different locations, and we get 2 different network IPs and everything. So I'm going to switch over to virtual machines, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just create the Auckland VM, and I'm going to go and say create virtual machine. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the Auckland resource group. I'm going to paste my VM in there, and I'm just going to choose a Windows 2016 data center. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to leave it as it is. I'm just going to go ahead and wait for that pricing thing to load while it thinks about it, and it needs to think some more. Okay, and then we'll type in a username. So I'll call my user AZ admin just for the sake of this lab. Give it a password. And give it a password again. And I'm going to go down. We're going to leave the RDP open for now. And we're going to change the disk, obviously, to dev test because it's much cheaper. Now we're going to come down to networking. Now, if you notice, we're on a 10.1.0.0/24, which means we get 254 IPs or 256 IP addresses. Now, just bear in mind, even though you get 254 IP addresses in Azure, Azure will always reserve 5. So you're only getting 250. Those 5 will always be reserved for Azure because Azure needs it to create your public IPs, your static IP, and obviously other bits and pieces. So those are reserved for Microsoft. So don't think, well, I'm creating a VNet, I've got 254 IP addresses. No, you don't. You will always only have 250. Just bear that in mind. Experience will teach you that. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go next. We're going to go ahead, disable boot diagnostics. We're not going to run any diagnostics on that VM. We go next. We're going to ignore tags for now and review and create. And this is going to scream away and create that server for us. And then we're going to create another one. And then once we've created our servers, we'll log into each server. We'll do a ping test to see if we can actually talk to the other server. And hopefully we shouldn't be able to get any comms. Once we verify that, we will then go into VNet pairing, into our network section, and we will then join those two VNets together using VNet pairing. And it sounds complicated, and if you've never done it, it can be a little bit daunting and a little bit frustrating, and you think, oh, I don't know how to do this. But once you've done the lab once or twice, it'll kick in and you'll say, well, that's great. So while that's going ahead and doing its thing, let's see if we can get our other VM up and running. In the meantime, let's go and create another VM. And again, we're going to throw this one into the Sydney VNet, and we're going to click paste. That's my Sydney VM. We're going to accept the same thing for the sake of the lab. I'm going to make everything the same in terms of the username. Call this one AZ admin. Just give it a password. Get password again. And of course, scroll down, go to disks. Let's choose standard SSD because it's a lab, and standard SSD is much cheaper and it's really great for testing, networking. If you notice now, we've got a different IP range. The other one was 10.1, this is 10.2. So we're going to leave that like that for now. And we're going to go ahead and go next. And of course, we're going to disable boot diagnostics, next. Not going to worry about tagging. We're going to review and validate that VM. And our one VM is up already, so that's freaking just amazing. We'll wait for that validation to pass and we'll crank that virtual machine. Now, once that virtual machine has been created, we can then go ahead and log into that machine and see if we can ping the other machine. Obviously, we can't ping the other machine until it's up. But the way I'm doing it here is giving you a base understanding of how to pair two networks together. Creating a VNet is very simple as well. If you just wanted to create a standalone VNet, there's no harm. We can go ahead and do that while we're waiting for this virtual machine to fire up. All you do is you go to network settings and you just click create, and we can go ahead here. Obviously, you're going to have to choose a resource group. You need a resource group for everything. And then all this would do would create the network. So if I went back in and said, let's create a new resource group, and I'll just call this one demo VNet, and I'll click OK. I'll give my VNet a name. I'll just call it demo VNet. Now, if you notice, we're not creating any virtual machines. We're just creating a VNet. You can always put a VM in that. So I want to show you two ways, because like I say, while that other virtual machine is waiting up, instead of us sitting here and talking about stuff, we can go ahead and do that. We can go ahead and change your IP range. Now, if you're using a /16, you're going to get 65,000 IP addresses. If you used a /24, you would get less IP addresses. If you use the /23, you'd get, again, /23 will give you 512 IP addresses. This will give you 254 IP addresses, and you can go ahead and do a whole lot of stuff. But what I want you to be aware of, you can't have, you see, when you're creating your VNet, it's going to ask you to create a subnet. You see, we've got no subnet here. So we can go ahead and say, well, let's create a subnet. And obviously we can call this demo subnet. And of course, you have to give it a range. Now, the range has to be almost something you can't overlap. Now, let me show you what I mean. If I come in here and I say, right, I'm going to give my subnet a range and say, well, I'm going to use that, and I'm going to go and click add. You can see that's within the range, but you can always change that and modify that. And then you can go into security, and by default, we don't have a Bastion host. Again, we'll cover Bastion another day. It's really cool. We don't have DDoS protection. We've got that disabled. Microsoft have the free DDoS protection that's enabled. Again, I'll show you how to do this in another lab. And we're not worried about a firewall for now because we haven't got a firewall. We haven't configured anything. We go to tags. You could go and give that VNet a name and tag it up. And you could go ahead and click create once the validation has passed. And that's how you create a standard VNet. And then obviously you would create your virtual machine, and then you go and throw your virtual machine in that VNet. So that's how you create a standard virtual VNet. So again, I thought I'd show you how to do that while our virtual machines are done. If we come into here, we can see now we are ready to log on to those VMs. So I'm going to go to my virtual machines, and you can see here I've got Auckland and Sydney. So let's log into Auckland. Let's just download that RDP client, and let's download, and let's go ahead and open that file. It's just opening up on another window here. Give me a second while I close this down.
That was easy to set up. That would be more complicated.
Yeah, it's not that complicated. It only gets complicated when people make it complicated. And if someone just takes the time to explain it to you, then it's not so hard to use or work with. So I'm just going to go now and bring that, log into that VNet and bring that over. Give it a sec, close that down, and click. And I'm just connecting, and I've lost my screen. Give me a sec, guys. Go back into Azure. Sorry, my fault, disconnecting you guys. That really doesn't help.
All right.
Logging back in. There we go, and we're back to our virtual machines. So I'm going to drag this over. Can you see that on my screen here?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to connect. Sorry, it's just opening up on another screen. So I'll just drag this over here. So AZ admin, and of course, type in that password. And it's allowing me to connect. And the reason I'm doing this is what you would do at any company that you went and worked at. So let's just drag this bad boy over here. And so we can see that guy is logging in. And I'm going to just log into the other one quickly as well, because you can see that's the Auckland VNet. So that's that server. And I want to bring the servers up side by side so that we can see that we definitely can't talk to each other. So I'm just going to say no, and we'll just fire up my other VM quickly, and we'll connect to Sydney. Go to RDP, and I'll download that RDP client, and I'll just go back into close that down there, and I'll close that down there, and I'm just logging into the other machine. I'll just bring this one up and leave that one there. And give me a second while I connect to the Sydney one. And just connect, and I'll drag Mr. Sydney over and connect to him. He's thinking about it. Let's log into Sydney. So AZ. Admin, type in his password. And let's bring him over here. And he's just connecting. As soon as we've connected, I will drag this over to this screen here. So we can see we now logged into our two VMs. We have our Sydney VM over here, and let's just squish this up so we can kind of see two screens at the same time. We don't really need to work in them. I just want to confirm that we can't ping them. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just drag that to this over out here. So we've got some real estate. Close this down. And I'm going to move over here and just say, no, I'm not too worried about that. And drag this down.
Yeah, for today, we're just going over basic stuff for VNet, but for probably next week, Ryan, I want to bother you. So we'll do a video, like a full lab video on how to do Azure with Server 2019, and how to add a computer to a domain, how to do everything on a lab environment, just for someone that's brand new, because I have people that are messaging me and they ask me like, Kevin, it doesn't work I can't do VirtualBox. So how do you do a whole lab environment, adding a computer to a domain on Server 2019 on Azure for free? So we'll do
Absolutely.
that next week. We'll do like a whole home lab
Absolutely.
thing.
I will show you how to create a home lab next week. It won't be a problem at all. And let's go ahead and change this font.
Awesome.
And let's go give it a little bit bigger. I don't really care because I want you to see some stuff there. And let's just move this over. And let's just close this up to the top, and let's close this down. Bring this back down here. And we'll do the same thing here. And we'll say CMD. And while that's running, we'll fire this one up. And
yeah, just pay attention to what Ryan's doing, because like that's an interview question. So usually when you have issues with DNS or you have issues with IP addresses, you go into a job interview. Typically you say, I will ping the server, or I will ping the host name, I will ping google.com, I will ping, it's just that's interview questions right there. If you tell that to a manager that I will ping 10 dot blah blah blah, manager's like, oh, okay, he knows what he's talking about. So
that's exactly what Kevin said is that's what we want to do. So first of all, I want to do this. I'm clicking in and type IP config. CONFIG and press enter. Now I can see my IP address here is 10.2.0.4, and I can kind of do here. I can go in IP config, hit enter, and I can see I've got 10.1.0.4. So what we want to do is we can scroll down a little bit, drag this window up a little bit, and I can go ahead and I can say ping 10.2.0.4, and I should get a no reply or a timeout. And as you can see, it's timing out because it can't connect to that VNet. I'm not getting a response from that server. And that's what we should expect as we work through our lab. So what I wanted to do is we'll come back over here, and I would then do the same thing here. So now this IP address was 10.1. So if we come up here, we can have a look at our IP address, and we can say, all right, let's try and ping that IP range as well, and we'll be good to go. So we know we weren't getting a reply. So then we'll come down here and we'll say ping 10.1.0.4, and we should also get no reply because we're not joined. Those VNets, even though we've created them, they're talking about them, we can't connect to those VNets because there's no connection to them at all. So what we're going to do is we're just going to minimize these bad boys so we don't need them. So now we've created our VNets and we say that's fantastic. We can't ping. So now we need to peer our networks. So how do we do that? That's pretty easy. We go to our virtual networks.
What does that mean? Like in a non-technical way, what does that mean?
Peering a network is simple terms of joining two networks together, allowing you access to be able to talk to two networks. Think of it as in organizations, you'll have VLANs. VLANs are segregated so that they can't talk to each other. I mean, they can either talk to each other or they can't. So you will have a network in Sydney, and we've got a network in Auckland, and they belong to the same company. Now we want to be able to talk to those networks, share resources with each other. You may have a file server in New York and a file server in Los Angeles. They're in two different parts of the country. They're on their own separate infrastructure, but yet you need to be able to communicate and share with each other. So that communication and connecting those networks together so they sort of like behave as one is called peering. So that's basically what it is. If someone says, oh, we need to pair a VNet, think of it as, okay, well, we need to connect a VNet so that we can access resources on it. So again, it's connecting two different networks together so that you can share information with each other. So that's about as simple as it gets. So if someone says pairing, think, okay, you want me to join two networks together?
Or you think about like when you think about pairing, you think about like, you know how you pair two cables together?
Yes.
Like, it's simple. How you like grab two cables and put them together, you're pairing the two cables. It feels like that. Like that's a simple definition.
All right, I'll give you a really good definition. I go into a shop and buy one shoe? Hey, I want to buy one shoe. I get a pair of shoes, and the pair of shoes match. I don't get one pair of shoes that's different, one shoe that's different, another shoe that's different. So you want to get something that matches and works together. So think of it that way. So right, what I've done now is I've gone into my network settings, and now you can see I've got my demo VNet, but we're not interested in that. We're interested in these VNets here. So I've got Auckland VNet and I've got Sydney VNet. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Auckland VNet, and we're going to wait for it to pop up, and it's going to pop up. And once that Auckland VNet now pops up, you can see here, if I go to my Auckland VNet interface here, you can see I get a whole lot of information about my VNet or my virtual network. So again, let's go back into Auckland VNets. We can go again to subnets, and you can see we've got my default subnet there. So if I click on that, we can actually see our IP address and our IP range. So what we want to do now is, as we scroll down, you see we've got this little name here called pairing. So I've gone into Auckland, and I've gone into subnets, and there's pairing. A lot of people say, well, I'll go to VNet, and once they click in the VNet, they can't see. So they'll come down here, and you've also got pairings over here. So we go into the Auckland VNet and look for pairings. It's underneath settings. Some people kind of miss it. So we click on pairings, and now this brings up this interface. So let's give us a bit more real estate. So we want to now go and add the Sydney to Auckland VNet. So obviously we need to give it a name. So I'm going to just do this for make it easy. I'm going to click copy, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. And we're going to say, right, we want Auckland to Sydney. And then of course we want to also go the other way back as well on the remote side. So we're going to say, then we want to be able to have Sydney to Auckland. Can you see that? And if you have a look here, you know, and then of course, by clicking the drop-down menu here, we now have our VNets. And, you know, we can select the Sydney VNet if we wanted to. And it's that easy, and we click add. Now, you've created your network pairing. The thing that you need to keep in mind is when you are creating your connections and you're sharing connections, you need to give them names that you can understand, like Auckland to Sydney, New York to Los Angeles, Los Angeles to China, China to Beijing, or I mean, UK, or whatever the case may be. So you need to give it a name that you understand what it is. Don't just say Auckland VNet, because that's not really helpful, because where's Auckland connecting to? Oh, it's connecting to New York. So then you would say New York to Auckland, because Auckland is connecting to the New York. And obviously New York can connect back, or however the case may be. So now we've created our VNets. Come in here and have it, make sure that everything is passed.
So someone's asking, is I guess pairing or peering, is that part of Azure, or is that part of the Windows Server? Someone just asking.
No, that's purely Azure. With Windows Server, it's different. It's purely Azure. And it's at the end of the day, like I say, if you end up on working in sysadmin, a lot of companies are moving to Microsoft Azure. And people say to me, well, why is there such a big uptake in Azure? The reason is you have Windows servers in your office or in your rack, or at home or whatever it is. It's a Microsoft product. So it makes sense to move to a Microsoft cloud platform. Yes, you can move to AWS, but people are moving to Azure because it's Microsoft. And as you know, Microsoft plays nicely with Microsoft, if that's the word if that's the way I can put it. But yes, it's a purely Microsoft thing. So if you know how to do this, it'll also make you a very good network engineer as well. So it's good to know. And like I say, some of it sounds complicated and looks complicated, but it's not that complicated if someone just takes the time to show you.
I was going to say that some people even got promoted and got our job in Azure Architect just watching our videos. So like the videos that me and Ryan have done. So if you know how to do these things, it's going to help you if you're trying to get into like a sysadmin role, because a lot of those jobs require you to know about on-prem AD and also Azure. So
what we're going to do now is, just to make sure there is no smoke and mirrors, we're going to just do another simple IP config. We're going to press enter. So all we want is that IP address. Remember, we couldn't ping to it. So now let's see if we can. So we click on there and press enter. I think make the screen a bit bigger, and I'll just move it over to the side. So we come down here and come on. And there we go. Now I'm gonna
do a GoFundMe for you, Brian, for a keyboard, man. You're like struggling over here with that keyboard.
No, it's just it's not my keyboard. It's my keyboard's changed. It's the Windows. I should have made it a bit smaller.
Oh, okay.
As you can see now, I'm getting a reply. I'm talking to this network, and you can say, well, okay, Ryan, now we can talk to this network, which means I can now share files, folders, map drives. And this is really good because you may have servers on different regions and that you need to share information with. So we can say, that's great. We can talk to this IP address, which is awesome. So what is this machine's IP address that we're in? So we say IP config. We press enter. And we can say, right, this is 10.1.4. So let's see if we can ping 10.1.4. So we say ping 10.1.0.4, enter. And there we go. We're talking and playing nicely together. So you've just created a VNet with two different networks in Azure in a very short space of time. It looks complicated, people, but trust me, having the right, someone show you the right way, it's not that complicated at all. And that's how you create a VNet. So now we can now share files and folders. You probably find, for example, you'll work at a company and they'll have a server in, like you say, Los Angeles, and you based in New York. But yet you are sharing resources over that wide area connection, or WAN, or wide area network. And this allows you to be able to share resources with each other. And there's a lot of things you can do. It also segregates stuff, and it brings everything into play. In the old days, or the old way of doing things, I would have to create a VPN connection or a WAN connection to that. And I'd have to set that up in a router and type in a whole lot of configurations. I'd have to allow that through the firewall, and then I'd have to do some testing, and then I'd have to grant access to people. And that could be very time consuming. Where here in Azure, you've just created your own VNet to VNet pairing or little WAN connection, and you can now segregate stuff. So you can say everybody in the 10.4 is in finance, and everyone in the 10.1, sorry, everyone in the 10.2 is finance, and everyone that's in the 10.1 could be IT. So there are many reasons why you would have separate VNets and segregation in your organization. In your university, you might have a student virtual network, you might have a teacher's virtual network, and then you might have an IT section that's only for IT or for finance. So again, like I say, it's very simple to create a VNet to VNet connection and pairing. And as you saw, creating a VNet is on its own in the demo is pretty easy, and creating a pairing is pretty easy as well. So that's how simple it is, guys. It's not that hard. It's just practice. It may look a little bit overwhelming, but it's not. Again, creating your VNet, Microsoft have made it very simple for us. Azure is a great product. It's very popular. It's starting to be integrated into help desk training. People are starting to use it more and more in their environments. You may get people say, well, I've got my network, I can't connect to it. So like Kevin said earlier on, what's the first thing you do? Ping. See if you can ping that network and see if we're going to get any information out of that network. So there's so many things that you can do. I mean, another cool command is you can type PA. And then of course you can go 10.1.0.4 and you could hit enter and your path ping would go ahead and it will do a trace route for you and it will go ahead and will compute some stuff and it'll tell you where you're going, where the next hop is. So there's a lot of commands you can use to help you ping and troubleshoot.
Look at that cool trick right there. Learn something new every day.
So again, at the end of the day, ping is not just used for ping. And there you go. I've got some more stats. I've got everything's been successful. I've got no packets that have dropped. It's connected straight to the Sydney VM. So it tells me which VM it's actually connecting to. If I just drag this and give it a bit more real estate, you can see it'll look much neater. But yeah, it tells me everything, packets sent, packets lost. So path ping gives you a lot more information than just ping. So again, there's a few other cool utilities, that, commands that you can use, but this is just one of them. So at the end of the day, it's just trying to share a little bit of knowledge with you guys.
All right. I was going to ask you, is there anything specific we need to do now that you created those two networks? Do you need to do anything in their firewall or you need to do absolutely nothing?
No.
Someone was asking about it.
No, you don't have to. That's the beauty. Azure has its own built-in firewall and it takes over. However, if you have an Azure firewall in place, you can actually, it'll detect that it's got that firewall in place and you can go ahead and open up ports and close ports. But again, Azure's pretty secure and you don't have to worry about that. There is a firewall that's running automatically. It's just a low-level firewall, but you can go into the Azure security settings and you can create a bastion. And a bastion is what you would use. And a bastion will allow you then to connect and do the same thing. And it'll pass traffic through that bastion host and you'll be good to go. So, but for you guys getting started, the Azure firewall takes care of it automatically because it knows what you're wanting to do. When we created that pairing, there's things in there that tells the firewall what to do and what not to do. But yeah, you don't need one at the moment for now. But I mean, you can really lock it down and get really tight by enabling an Azure firewall and setting that firewall up and allowing traffic from this virtual network to another virtual network, from this region to another region. So yes, you can use a firewall and you will have to do some configuration down there. But to begin with, no, this really does pass the traffic through and it does everything correctly in the background. Cool. So that covers that. That's how easy that was.
That was really easy.
Yeah. Got any other questions? And I mean, like I say, at the end of the day, the main reason you would have VNets is if you created a file share and then you wanted to share access or map drives, you could do that and then map that and then vice versa and share information between each other. Or you could even go as far as creating some storage and mapping that storage down, setting up file sync, and then you could sync stuff across automatically. Excuse me. Or if you're learning Windows Server and you get into Federation services, excuse me, you can actually set up Active Directory Federation services. And if I create a file on here, it'll automatically sync over here. If I create a file here, it'll automatically sync over here. So you're always keeping your documentation and your resources up to date. You're not having two copies of stuff in two places that are not up to date. However, bear in mind, if I delete something from here that's on a Federation link, it will delete it here as well. If I delete something that's on a file sync setup on here, it will delete that back. So that's the advantage of having file sync and federation services, because if you only have to create the document once and it automatically will populate it across to 20 servers on your link and everybody will get it. However, if somebody makes a change, that change is then replicated across the whole network and everybody gets to see that change. But here's the kicker. If I delete that document, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to delete it from everywhere else. so it's things that you need to be aware of. And these are common problems where people say, oh, well, I deleted a file. And so when we say, well, that file's not there. So if a file's been deleted, you need to kind of think in IT terms, okay, was it on a federation link? In other words, was it Active Directory Federation services? Was it file synced? If that's the case, then it's deleted it off all 25 servers or 10 servers in your network. So what you do is you just do a file restore, pop it back on either box, and it should automatically then replicate back again to all those other servers. You don't have to copy it over to 25 servers. You just copy it once and let file sync and federation services take care of the rest, and you get on with the rest of the IT work that you need to do. So there are many ways of setting up your infrastructure. And this is, again, VNet pairing will allow us to have multiple servers in multiple regions and share resources and connect those resources with each other. Again, guys, not too hard. Someone should just take the time to show you and spend that time with you, showing you the correct way to do things, and you'll be good to go. And
that was fairly easy, fairly easy to set up. And well, next week we'll do a whole lab training on how to make your own lab at home with Azure, with adding Active Directory and adding a computer to a domain and stuff like that. Because some people don't know how to do that on Azure, because it's not the same thing as VirtualBox. It's two different things. So you have to know how to actually set up differently. Because the way I do it on VirtualBox, I'm doing a static IP, and then on Azure it's totally different. So we'll go over that next week for people that are brand new, because you may not have enough money, or you may not have a good computer, so you want to get started on it on Azure, right? So we'll do something like that so you guys understand how that works.
I mean, absolutely. I'll set up what I call a traditional on-prem network, where we'll create a domain controller, 2 domain controllers, and we'll use the Active Directory DNS, not the Azure DNS. Because if you try to use the Azure DNS to connect your DC, it will tell you, go and fly a kite. And the reason it will tell you to go and fly a kite is you can only have one server with DHCP, and Azure has its own server with DHCP in the background. That's where we get all these IP addresses from. They've got to come from somewhere. So it comes from Azure's Active Directory and DNS. So when we create our traditional domain controller, we will turn off the Azure DNS. And we'll use our server DNS, because we want our server to give our users the IP addresses and stuff. So we'll have some fun doing that next week. And that way you can practice to your heart's content. And what you would do there is exactly what you'll do in the real world. You can set up OUs, group policies, security groups. You can join multiple machines to those DCs. And we'll set up 2 DCs, so we can do what I call, if we create a user on one DC, it'll automatically populate to the next DC. It's not that hard. And again, the reason I want you to set up 2 domain controllers, because if you go to a company, it's very rare you'll find one DC in the network. And the reason is because if that domain controller goes down, your whole network is down. Nobody can work. So people always have 2 DCs or more, because if one domain controller goes down, the other domain controller can carry on working. Nobody's going to be affected, and you can live to fight another day while you're fixing that DC that's gone down. Some companies may have 3 or 4 DCs in place, just depending on what they're talking about. And again, if people say DC is short for domain controller.
Controller. Yep.
Yeah. So don't get confused. Active Directory and domain controller. If it's got Active Directory on it, it's a DC. You cannot have a server, a domain controller without Active Directory. It's impossible. So,
and then I guess it's always the discussion I make. If you're help desk or IT support, the manager will never give you access to the server. So you'll have something called RSET tools on your computer, which is Windows 10 has its own built-in RSET tools. You could just install that. and then you can run everything from the computer on Windows 10 instead of doing it on the server. So if you're a help desk, typically you're given access to that. You're not given access to the whole server. We don't do that in IT. So
and we can do that in that lab. We can throw in a Windows 10 box, and we can install the RSAT tools, and you can see it for yourself, and you can say, okay, let's see what RSAT is showing me, and then we'll go into the Active Directory, and you'll see it'll be exactly the same copy of what you see. So yeah, Kevin's right. Everybody I know uses RSAT tools, and it's the correct way to do stuff. You don't want to just give somebody access to a DC. You don't do that. Kevin is right. You give them the remote desktop server tools, and you access it from your Windows 10 or Windows 7 or Windows 11 PC that way. And you can find that in the control panel, add and remove features, and you just go turn that feature on, it'll install it, shut it down, connect it again, and you are up to the up and running and off to the races. Just bear in mind your local machine needs to be connected to the domain
for it to work.
For it to work. If you're not on the domain, we'll
It's not
install
gonna
the tools,
do it. It's not gonna work.
but it's not going to work. Yeah. Cool.
Anyway, guys, there's no questions. Someone said, do you guys use RMM?
The remote management tools, yes, you can use RMM as well. It's quite common. Again, it just depends on where you want to install those tools, but yes.
Depends on the company.
It depends on the company. So yes,
yeah.
And that's a very good question. So whoever answered that question, they can thumbs up, mate. Really, really good. So yes.
All right, guys. I'll let you guys go because we have to do some training with students and interns. So Ryan, thank you again for showing us something new. I always learn something new from you every day. That's why that's why I like having you on my channel, because I learned something, and then the people that are watching learn something too. And I enjoy being around someone that knows more than me, because that's how I grow as a person. You can only grow with people that know more than you. You cannot be in the same room with someone that knows the same as you. That doesn't make any sense, right? You want to be in the room that someone knows more than you. Now, if you know more than someone else, and that's a problem, you should be in a room that everyone knows, so.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yes, and I'm the same, Kevin. I also try to learn from other people as well. But yeah, you're right. Money on the button.
Anyway, guys, you guys have a good day. I don't know if Ryan wants to say anything. You have any final words?
No, like I say, you guys have a good day. And again, thank you so much for supporting me. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I really appreciate all of you guys. You guys be awesome, and we'll see you next week. And be safe and have fun, guys.
Same thing as me. Take care, guys. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I hope you guys stay safe. I'm in New York right now. Ryan's in New Zealand, by the way. So if you guys wonder, like, where Ryan's from New Zealand, I'm from New York. New York is extremely hot right now over here. I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I hope you guys have a good weekend. And if you guys have any questions, you could always ping me on Discord. You could always ping Ryan on LinkedIn. Ryan's on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is there. So if you guys want to ask us any questions, you could ping him on LinkedIn. You could ping me on Discord, and we're always willing to help. I know I'm busy, he's busy, but we're always willing to help. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and continue learning, continue growing. Hopefully this video helps you in helping you land a job in IT. And that's what we're trying to do. We try to help people. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. Anyway, take care, guys. Bye.
Take care, guys. Cheers.
Bye. Take care.